Welcome to BFO Toronto's Estate Administration and Grief presentation. My name is Taya Mikado. I'm a lawyer that practices wills and estates at Fern Law. It's just a couple of streets away from BFO Toronto's office, so I'm happy to be working in the community. And today we're going to be talking about estate administration as far as it relates to grief. I am very excited to present my co-presenter, Jasmine Full, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, I am Jasmine. I am a new BFO volunteer and a second year law student. I'm actually currently working in estate litigation. So I know a little bit about the litigious aspects of the wills and estates, but I'm so very thankful and grateful for BFO for having me present with Taya. So I'll let you take it away, Taya.
Amazing. Thank you. And we're really lucky to have Jasmine join our team of volunteers. I'm really excited that we can be presenting this for everybody and that you've taken the time to come and do this with me. So thank you. I also want to say Jasmine is responsible for these beautiful slides. So thank you so much for putting those together.
I tried.
So this is, if you're not familiar with what BFO Toronto is, it's a charity that works within Toronto. It's one chapter of what is Bereaved Families of Ontario. And since 1978, BFO has been providing thousands of people with their peer support model of their peer support groups. So in short, they're helping grieved loved ones in our communities manage their grief or navigate their grief through peer support. Two of BFO Toronto's organizational goals that we hope to meet today are to be a community leader in the provision of mutual support and bereavement services, and to increase awareness among service users and the public on the issues related to grief and bereavement. I share these goals with you today to frame the purpose of our presentation and to share that it offers kind of a different form of support than what BFO Toronto normally does, because we're trying to bridge the worlds of legal services and grief care to support those navigating loss. It's important for us to share that the information in this presentation is intended for the purposes of providing information only and is to be used only for the purposes of guidance. This presentation is not legal advice and is not intended to be legal advice. Please consult your lawyer, your legal counsel regarding any specific questions or concerns you may have about the subject matter of this presentation. So now we can get into it a little bit. So who do we think this presentation is for? We did intend that this would be for people who are currently acting in the role of estate trustee, which was previously known as an executor, people that might anticipate being an executor, or family members that are supporting an executor or supporting someone through the process in navigating a loss, and then our BFO volunteers and other professionals that are offering grief-related services. So this is the kind of way that we're going to navigate this evening. We're going to begin by introducing estate administration and the role of an executor or estate trustee. We're also going to talk about what grief is and what is estate administration, strategies for balancing grief and legal duties, and then we're going to offer some grief support resources. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm sorry that this might be a little bit legalese, but I've tried to break it down so that we can kind of have a starting point for what estate administration is. This process typically will involve identifying and securing the assets, then paying outstanding debts, then distributing the assets to the remaining and rightful beneficiaries. It can be according to the deceased's will or by law if the person did not have a will. It may also include arranging for funerals or, what to do with the deceased remains according to their wishes. It could be addressing any other personal wishes that were expressed by the deceased. And the person that's responsible for taking care of and doing these things is what we call the executor or estate trustee. This is either someone that's appointed by the court or someone that just assumes the role when there's no court appointment needed. No one is actually obligated to take on the role of estate trustee. It's actually a voluntary role. So you have to formally accept or formally apply for this role and taking on that responsibility because it includes a lot of legal and financial duties, and you have a fiduciary duty when you're an executor and estate trustee to the beneficiaries of the estate. We recognize that this can be a very, very difficult role to take on, not just practically, but emotionally as well. So I would encourage you to, before you accept this role, think about what it entails, and then make sure you have the right team of people around you and supporting you if you navigate estate administration as an executor. So, as I kind of mentioned already, there's a little bit of what is probate, and it's a bit of an elusive term that people use in a variety of different ways to describe a variety of parts of the estate administration process. But in short, what I like to understand probate to be and what can be legally considered is the legal process where a court officially appoints someone into the estate trustee or executor role. And this will be done either by validating the will, so reviewing it as a part of the probate application, and seeing that you're the right person that the deceased had appointed in their will or by law the suitable person if that person did not have a will. This is usually a spouse, a child, or a next of kin. So the legal process will include to be appointed as the estate trustee if you're applying through the court is called an application for a certificate of appointment of estate trustee. When the court looks at it, it'll either approve or reject it. And if it's approved, the court will provide you with this official certificate of appointment, which then the estate trustee, you can use at banks or to do other property transfers, to access accounts, and to just make sure that certain tasks can be done. It's not always necessary for certain estates to get the certificate of appointment. But in these situations, which it are, and you'll have to consult with your lawyer to know if that applies for the estate that you're working with or not, it's kind of like the golden key to getting certain tasks done and accessing certain accounts or making certain property transfers happen. So, what are the responsibilities of an executor? I know I've touched on a bunch already, but we also just want to highlight that this role extends beyond these legal duties. They'll include certain things like navigating your own grief, supporting grieving family members and friends, communicating with so many people like lawyers, accountants, business partners of the deceased, and then also trying to manage the time and energy, your time and energy throughout. As you can imagine, or as you may be currently experiencing, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time, and it can sometimes go without thanks. So it's definitely something to consider. It's something to think about. And also, I hope you feel validated in the fact that we know as lawyers that deal with this every day, it is difficult. And we know you're trying your best. And we hope that you hire lawyers or you hire other people or you have a support team around you that can really make sure that you're being taken care of as well throughout the process. Here's a bit of an overview of some of the different aspects of the estate administration process that we have highlighted. It might be worth pausing to review if you are considering becoming an estate trustee, or if you want to find some ways that you can help someone else who is currently acting as an estate trustee. All right, so now what is grief? Let's get into it a little bit. This is one of the most difficult parts for some people about estate administration, and it's often not recognized as easily or with enough softness for those that are navigating the role. At BFO, we know that grief is messy, it's personal, and it's deeply human. Some of the things that we'll share with our volunteers in their training or with our peer support participants is that we don't believe it's something that can be fixed. Rather, we are here working in this space, offering these resources so that it can be better understood and so that we can feel supported throughout grief, especially in estate administration where there's that gap between what's expected of an executor and what people are actually experiencing after loss. We're hoping that either through our services, our support services, that maybe you'll be able to find a group of people, peer support members that will help you navigate the grief that you might be feeling throughout the process. We also recognize that it's important to know that the family, social, cultural, faith, and life experiences that you've had and the deceased has will really affect how you're grieving. And we also think it's important to validate that deep grief an individual or family is experiencing following a death is completely normal. Grief is a unique experience for everyone, and everyone carries within themselves the capacity to heal. Some of the other things that we like to address is that a list of grief myths. And in particular, I wanted to point out that the five stages of grief, which is an ingrained part of kind of our cultural consciousness, that this is the natural progression of grief emotions when you're experiencing the death of a loved one. It turns out that this model was never meant to apply to the bereaved. So those of us who have experienced grief or are experiencing grief due to the death of a loved one. It was introduced as a study of people who were dying, who are, experiencing some kind of critical illness. I was really surprised by this when I first learned it because it was something I just thought was a common fact. But I want to share it and reiterate it that every part of your grief and every stage that you're in is normal. And there isn't a set stage and a set order of ways to feel and experience grief. These are some of the terms that we like to teach at BFO to volunteers and to some of our peer support participants. They may also resonate with you because some of us are experiencing anticipatory grief, knowing that someone in our lives is either going to pass away or is facing some kind of illness. And that is a whole different kind of grief or a whole different set of emotions that might accompany your experience and even your contemplation of being an executor and an estate trustee. This slide, I'll just leave it up here and you can pause and read it through. Some of the other ones that I will also note is disenfranchised grief. This is we defined as grief that is socially not supported or recognized. So sometimes people will say pet loss is not something that people or socially our communities really recognize as a loss that you can be grieving. And you might not be, your work might not offer you bereavement days for the loss of your pet. But that would be disenfranchised grief because you can feel grief over the loss of anything. And while we at BFO focus on the loss of those loved ones in our communities and around us, we recognize that grief comes in many forms and as a reaction to so many different things. All right, so I'm going to pass it on now to Jasmine, who is going to talk about strategies for balancing grief and legal duties.
Thank you, Taya, for that amazing introduction. I really appreciate setting the stage with some grief literacy concepts. I think that'll really help me kind of explain the complexities and navigating grief and legal duties together. So, the first things first, I will say, with my time at BFO, I believe one of the most important lessons I ever learned was about honoring grief. And I believe this is something we should keep in mind throughout the process of estate administration is that there is always time to honor the grief and sit with it, no matter how long your to-do list is. And the most important part about grief is that it does not go away if you ignore it, and it does not follow a set progression. It's not linear, like you will not grow over grief the longer time goes on. And you are allowed to give yourself moments to experience your grief amidst all of the responsibilities, and you will be able to step away if you need to. There's always time to do that as well. So these are some important, I guess, ground rules you can call it for about the duties I'm going to get into more in depth. So, about seeking help. So, there is help in many different corners of this world when it comes to estate administration. First, the most obvious is legal assistance. And that can be, of course, a lawyer, but that can also be financial assistance. That could be an accountant. That could be a financial advisor. Third, it could be family and friends. If you know a lawyer in your family, if you know an accountant in your family, or even just someone to talk to, someone to speak to, someone to bounce ideas off of or on how you can delegate, which I will get more into. You have a lot of resources around you, even support groups. BFO is one of those support groups that you can go to. And lastly, there are professional estate administrators out there. So if you decide that you do not want to take on this role, you are able to delegate or hire someone else to do this for you. Delegation. I just mentioned this, and I believe this is one of the overlooked aspects because it feels a bit hard to delegate tasks. And of course, there is limits to it, and you can consult with a legal advisor on to what extent you can delegate a task. However, it is important to know that the option is still there, and often loved ones may not want to involve anyone in this process because they might feel uncomfortable. There's also a bit of a privacy concern, like, do you really want to share about someone's estate? However, this can really help you deal with that intersection between the grief and the almost burdening feeling of having this long to-do list of things that you have to do. And just because you've been designated as executor does not mean that you have to do everything yourself and that you are the only one who has to burden the grief and the to-do list, as I like to call it. So you can delegate tasks. For example, you can ask, hey, your cousin, your brother, sister to make the phone calls to the funeral home. If you need an accountant, you can ask someone to set up appointments with your lawyer, and so on and so forth. Or if you need valuations done at your house, ask someone to set that up. And small tasks like this, to have someone else do it and to just check one more thing off your to-do list, can really go a long way, especially mentally. One thing that you can do to start off, and I think is really, really helpful, is to get the to-do list down first. I think initially, when we get into this role, the most daunting part of it is thinking about every single thing that has to be done. And the easiest way to deal with this long list of stuff is to organize it. In fact, we do have some resources on our website, including the Executor's Handbook and Executor's Checklist, which I will point to later in this presentation where you can find these, but it can help you make a list. So, for example, some of the tasks that you might find on this list might be locating the will. If there is a will, that is always the first starting point because a will, to an extent, outline your duties, outline perhaps the size of the estate, who the beneficiaries are, and will help you guide you in understanding where your duty is, where your fiduciary duty is. So it's important to get a kind of visual or map out, what is this estate? Who is it going to? And that stuff. Next is usually the funeral arrangements. So arranging for a burial, a cremation, if there's a plot of land that has already been purchased, locating that and making those plans. This can be one of the most difficult tasks because it's usually very, very fresh into the grieving process, but it's usually one of the first tasks that we do other than reading the will. Next, notifying the creditors, notifying any beneficiaries of any benefits they might be receiving. Another task is freezing accounts, securing the assets. I believe securing the assets actually can be a little bit of a daunting task to collect everything. And sometimes this is going to be a bit mixed into the probate process because you might need a certificate first to, for example, to get into a bank account or to get into a locker or to get into maybe a certain property, or to get access to certain accounts. So this can be one of the biggest tasks, but you will have to deal with this at one point or another. Pets is a underrated one. What happens to the dog? What happens to the cat? Where do they go? Did they have somewhere to go? And so dealing with that is a bit of a sneaky one, and many people do not think about their pets, what's going to happen to them. So that's another one as well. Redirecting mail. I think we've all moved at some point in our lives, and we know that this is not a fun task at all. And another underrated one, social media accounts. Can you even get into social media accounts? Can you even find the password? And this is not all to scare you away from the role, but this is to tell you that these are some of the things that you might find on a to-do list. And it's important to make a list first on what you have to do and take your time with each task and know that you can get through each task one at a time. And even if you are the slowest, the turtle will win the race, but go at it and go at it organized. That's what I will recommend here. Resolution conflict. So as mentioned in the beginning, I work in more of the litigious aspect of wills and estates when a dispute arises. And disputes usually arise between family members, it can arise between beneficiaries, it can arise between if there's multiple estate trustees. they can have some issues between themselves in terms of making a decision on behalf of the estate. And this can really exacerbate any, um, I guess, tough emotions that you may feel during the grieving process because it'll just make everything more complex, and it may add to any level of frustration that you're feeling, any level of stress, any level of anger. And so it's very important to have some sense of strategy on how to navigate any dispute that may arise. And it's important to remember that as an executor, that you should be promoting an open communication system and ensuring transparency, trying to update as much as you can, and of course, giving your listening ear, giving your shoulder as well. You can also hire a mediator or a neutral third party to help you resolve conflicts. And this is not just a mediator in a legal sense, but even a third party person who can, maybe someone that's a bit more distant to the situation, who can speak between parties and help come to a more positive environment and help everyone get into the mindset of resolution. And of course, this is a very important one, and it's part of every executor's duty is to keep records of your decisions. And this is not just decisions of making money or collecting things or making transactions, but it's also about decisions that you might take with respect to certain people. And the nice thing about this is that the more records you keep, the easier it is to resolve conflict, because then you can just say, well, hey, I did this because of this, and I did this because of this. And it helps you to remember what you did, why you did it. And if you have to explain yourself, you can do it confidently. And that will really help you with any feeling of stress or anger or frustration with other people, is to know that you know why you did the things you did, and you can explain yourself if you have to, and you can feel confident in your decisions. And of course, being an executor, as Taya has already mentioned, it is a voluntary role. Of course, there are some steps after you try to step away, but that does not mean that you are not entitled to do so if you need to do it. Just remember that you do have the option and that it's not impossible to step away if you need to, even temporarily. So, resources. I mentioned resources. So, on our BFO website, you'll find a tab called Resources. And under it, you'll find things like the Widow's Handbook and the Executor's Checklist. And right, you can see right here that when you click Resources, you'll find a Widow's Guidebook. And actually, when you click on that, you'll find a bunch of resources from Scotia Wealth. Things like Am I Okay, Managing Expectations, Financial Inventory, and of course the handbook and the checklist. And so it will help you make your to-do list and to organize yourself and to just help that feeling of being overwhelmed. And it should be a useful resource. And I hope that this video and this presentation will also be a wonderful resource for you to refer back to as well. So I'd like to say, as we come to an end for this presentation, it flew by, honestly. Thank you so much for taking a time to give it a listen. Um, I would love to hear from anyone who is watching this presentation, comments, or in our private feedback forum, or an email to BFO or to me. I've left my contact here below. And Taya, if you have any final words for everyone.
No, thank you so much, Jasmine, for closing us off on a great note and bringing up some really, really important topics. I hope everyone enjoyed this presentation as well. And hopefully we can put some more things together for you all in the future.
Thank you, everyone.